Coin Traders, how we doing? Thanks for joining me for the show. Looking at ICP, Internet Computer, ICP on that ticker. Pretty nice structure overall, and actually a few days ago did post a tweet over here on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, about ICP having one of the best weekly structures in the altcoin space. And so we are going to be diving into the ICP chart and pretty much talking about why this is the case. And just a reminder, if you're not currently following me here over on Twitter or X, drop me a follow at coin_trades is the handle. Looking forward to chatting with everyone over here on Twitter or X. So looking over here back at ICP, and specifically, let's go ahead and talk about the weekly first, since that was what the tweet was primarily about. And do want to dive into this because what we have with a lot of other altcoins right now is that we actually have a lot of break in this structure where support's actually failing below the 26 period EMA, when in the case of ICP right now, we're actually finding it holding in between the 12 and 26 period EMAs. So very good sign right now for ICP, especially since we haven't overall made a new lower low on the weekly. Now, we do have a potential threat, and a lot of people have called this out about a potential head and shoulders pattern forming. So we have the left shoulder, the rally, and then we have a pullback forming a right shoulder, and now we're trying to defend a price high on top of this neckline. Now, we don't have a specific price line for it, but what we do have is a trend line for the neckline. So this is going to be an extremely important level to look out for. And in addition to that, also have a pretty significant downtrend resistance line. So more or less, we're kind of more on the pattern of forming this longer term pennant. And you could call it a case for also having a little bit more of that head and shoulders type pattern too. But realistically, we're looking at this as being more of a pennant type pattern. And obviously then in that case, if we get a bullish break or bearish break, that's likely going to play off. And pretty much that is likely going to play out in that instance with this type of pattern as well. But we are starting to get a lot tighter and tighter and tighter as we do approach the apex of this wedge, which is looking like around the 11th to 12th of May, depending on how we end up drawing these lines. But now do want to talk about specifically price levels. So looking at a very decent close, and we talked about this on the previous video as well, that we're looking at a very solid defense of the price point right at 1183. So specifically, we are going to be looking at that, especially if we look at that being part of this head and shoulders or even part of this pennant type pattern. So realistically, we're not going to see a change in longer term structure unless we get a close below this level on the daily, below 1183. Now, right now, over the last week and a half, 2 weeks or so, we have been getting stuck up below these exponential moving averages. So we were looking at holding very nice EMA support this whole way up ever since the rally started back in the fall. So now to see daily EMA resistance holding up, especially after this break, reclaiming on top of the EMA band and then immediately rejecting and then now confirming EMAs as resistance. So that's definitely something to note, especially after holding it for such a long period of time. We got extremely choppy, not really reliant too much on these EMAs, and then now obviously in this position where we have been holding it as resistance for a couple weeks now. Specifically, if we zoom in, we're looking at resistance, big resistance in between the 12 and 26 periods. Now, I haven't really seen too much of an influx of volume. So the reason that once this broke right here, once we broke below EMAs, is that we had this huge, massive influx of bullish volume. And that's pretty much why the bulls were able to reclaim this big EMA band and actually get so high above it. And specifically rally about 100%. So we were looking at from the bottom all the way to the top of the move, about 98%. So the only way now that we could see a scenario like that again, especially after this attempt kind of more or less failed and couldn't even hold anything at all and immediately pulled back below this EMA band with decreasing bearish volume, especially after we didn't get this nice follow through, only 3 days worth. So although the magnitude was nice, especially after defending this nice 1183 support point, we have been starting to slip it, but we do know that 3 days worth of upside right now was able to actually see prices maintaining this whole period of time, basically since the 20th of April. But now one thing that I do want to do is turn on VPVR, volume profile, visible range, and just look at this overall center point of mass, which is effectively the heart line for this major period of chop that we've essentially been looking at since the start of the year. So ever since the start of the year and we had this major rally right at the end of the year, we were looking at prices being about the same and more or less just had this constant steady chop in price. And that's what's created a lot of this mess. So the good thing about that being now is that that has provided one of our longer periods of support, which is exactly why we have kind of stabilized in this overall range and why we do have the weekly chart looking so good and bullish compared to a lot of other altcoins right now in this instance. So even as you can see, we just have a ton of downside lower shadows that do confirm a lot of support, and they pretty much align with this weekly level of closing support. So if we actually draw a price line for where we're seeing closing support on the weekly, 12,487 is pretty much where we're starting to see a lot of closing support, and we've actually had support above that level ever since maintaining this bullish candle on top of it, which started on the 29th of January. So effectively ever since February, been maintaining very nice weekly close on top of this 1248 level, which is pretty much right around the period or the time, the level rather of this big point of mass for ICP. Additionally, one of the things is that if we actually look left, this is a big point of resistance prior to actually breaking above this level. Now, turning on the technical indicators for this weekly chart here, a couple things to look at specifically with RSI and stochastic RSI. So let's go ahead and look at RSI first. Well, a lot of people know that we do have bearish divergence right now, lower highs in this RSI at higher highs in price. So despite having one of the best setups, we do know that a potential pullback is on the horizon. But one of the things that we're actually looking at with this RSI right now is that if we actually zoom out and we draw a price level, you can see that pretty much we're looking at support right now coming in about 52. And so if we do correlate this with where we saw previous resistance for the RSI, hopefully we know we can find support for the RSI in that level when we did have these resistances come in. So overall, kind of a good sign that we have pulled back and actually found a little bit of support coming in based off previous technical resistances for RSI. And then pairing that with down below right now, we're actually looking at stochastic RSI pretty far below this 20 line, looking like we're going to try to find a very nice bullish cross on it, which should put a lot more pressure to the upside, especially if we can confirm some of these supports like we have been able to do, and also see this RSI be that support right at the 53 line, which should have plenty of room to return and resume upside trading and provide a lot more of that upside directional pressure. Now, I do want to flip over here to the 4-day chart as well. Don't talk about this a ton, and we do have less than a day until we see this candle close. And the thing that's significant about it right now is that we're trying desperately to maintain support for ICP in between the zone between 26 and the 50-period EMA. You can see already we've had a little bit of wicking below, but we still maintain closing support on top of 26. Well, now after losing that, still trying to maintain support on top of the 50, which we're looking for right now. But this has come after all these candles have rejected from the 12-period EMA and also confirmed support on the 26, but on the current candle, we have rejected from 12, as well as falling support below this 26. So like we said, we do have 1 day left as of time of recording for this to actually see a little bit more dip buying and maintain support on top of this 26. Otherwise, we are going to confirm that rejection and resistance above that level and then break that level of support, thereby putting a lot of pressure and test on the bulls to be able to defend this zone from the 26-period EMA down to the 50-period EMA, especially after putting in a lower high. So we're really going to come down to this whole price level pretty much coming in at 1183 like we've talked about, especially since on this 4-day chart, we can look left and also see this was a big point of closing support as well. So closing support, and then also trying to maintain support on top of this 50. So going to be a big level once again, otherwise very much at risk of some more downside pressure. And in that instance, probably going to resume a little bit of a longer term downtrend that we would expect to play out throughout the summer and maybe potentially into early fall based on how these longer term charts go. But so specifically, you can see down here on the volume, we're looking at very minimal volume and only 1 day of upside even in that instance. But we do have a lot of upside direction. This bullish hammer candle didn't really have follow through, and that's why we're starting to get a little bit more of that slippage. So despite having 2 days, we are surrounded by a lot more bearish days, and that's why coming down to defending a lot of these support levels is just going to be so key and critical. So with that, I want to actually roll over into the 2-day chart because right now we're getting this bearish cross playing out on these exponential moving averages as well. And because we were maintaining 2-day EMA support as well, especially on this pullback and retracement, pulling back and rallying above, but then getting no follow through. So confirming once again EMA resistance. And especially now that we are getting that bearish cross that we have seen already on the 12 and 26, and potentially coming up on the 12 and 50, which does seem likely at this point. So probably going to end up seeing another test of this 1184, 1183 zone for support. But unless we somehow see a lot more bullish upside for the rest of the altcoin and crypto space, we're probably going to expect and anticipate a little bit more downside pressure and probably some more sell-off as we do see some price slippage to the downside here. So overall, in summation, just really going to be eyeing this downside support of 1182 to 1183 all the way up to 1184, and then how that also plays out with this longer term trend line that does form this longer pennant or even potentially this head and shoulders type pattern. So right now on the current candle would be looking at about 1236 potentially as that does ride up, be it about the 1250 line. So could end up seeing, hopefully this provides a little bit more of that supportive level. And so hopefully between this rising trend line for support and also this price level, we do get a little bit more of that upside direction and some more follow through volume to push prices back to the upside and actually knock out some of these upside resistances, which we would be looking at about 15.5 cents, or excuse me, $15.50 for that. Selling pressure overall does still seem to be falling and fading though, so as long as we can maintain supports and see selling pressure start to ease off, then I would expect these levels to hold or even an upside move to be coming in soon to either put in a lower high and then hopefully put in a higher low. But either way, still looking at a lot of good signs for the longer term for this ICP chart, especially since it is set up one of the best out of the altcoins right now. But as always, would love to know all thoughts, comments, issues, disagreements, all that stuff down in the comments sections below. But otherwise, that will wrap up our show for ICP Internet Computer. Hope you all enjoyed. If you did, please hit the thumbs up, like, and subscribe if you have not done so just yet. Do appreciate all the continued love and support. As always, it does mean so much. Stay safe, take care, coin traders, and I'll catch you back in the next video.